You've been taught to hate him. 10 heads, 20 arms, the man who tore Sita from her home. That's the Ravana most people grow up knowing. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Before he was a villain, Ravana was one of the greatest scholars, the fiercest devotee, and quite possibly the single most brilliant mind in the entire Ramayana. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why so many people, even today, quietly regard him not just as a demon king, but as one of the most extraordinary human beings ever described in our scriptures. Let's start with where Ravana actually came from, because it changes everything. Ravana was not born a demon in the way most people imagine. He was the son of the sage Vishrava and the grandson of Pulastya, one of the great Vedic rishis, and one of the mind-born sons of Brahma himself. By birth, Ravana was a Brahmin, a scholar's bloodline, not a monster's, and he lived up to that inheritance in a way almost no one else in our Itihasas did. Tradition holds that Ravana had mastered all 4 Vedas and all 6 Vedangas, the auxiliary sciences of Vedic scholarship: phonetics, ritual, grammar, etymology, prosody, and astronomy. His 10 heads are traditionally understood by scholars not as some grotesque mutation, but as a symbol. 10 heads for 10 directions of complete mastery, or for the depth of his command over the 4 Vedas and 6 Shastras combined. Some traditions read it as representing his conquest over the 6 enemies of the human mind: lust, anger, greed, attachment, ego, and jealousy, with 4 more heads representing the 4 Vedas he had fully internalized. Either way, the message embedded in his very form was the same. This was not a being of brute strength alone. This was a being of complete knowledge. And that knowledge was earned, not gifted. Ravana performed extraordinary tapasya, intense, prolonged penance, to please Lord Shiva. Different tellings describe the severity of his devotion in different ways, but the core of the story remains consistent across nearly every version. Ravana's devotion was so total, so uncompromising, that Shiva himself was moved. In return, Ravana was granted the Chandrahas, a divine sword, along with boons of extraordinary power. This is a devotee whose relationship with the divine was not casual. It was total surrender, expressed through unimaginable discipline. There's a moment tied to this devotion that's worth sitting with for a second, because it tells you exactly the kind of being we're actually talking about. When Ravana once tried to lift Mount Kailasha itself, in an act of overwhelming devotional intensity, Shiva simply pressed down with a single toe, pinning Ravana beneath the mountain. Most beings in that position would have cried out in fear or anger. Ravana, even trapped under the weight of a mountain, turned that moment into an offering. He composed on the spot one of the most revered hymns in the entire Shaiva tradition. Pain became praise. That is the caliber of devotion we are talking about. Not devotion that only shows up when life is easy, but devotion that turns crushing weight into art. And if you want proof of the depth of that devotion, you don't need to look further than something that still exists today, word for word, syllable for syllable. The Shiva Tandava Stotram, the very hymn born from that moment beneath Kailasha. And here's the part that should genuinely astonish you. This isn't just beautiful devotional poetry. It is one of the most structurally sophisticated pieces of sound-based composition in the entire Sanskrit tradition. Every line follows a precise meter, 16 syllables per line, with long and short syllables alternating in an exact, unbroken rhythm. Scholars of Sanskrit prosody still study it for how its sound patterns physically recreate the feeling of Shiva's cosmic dance, the rolling repetition of damad 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 damar, mimicking the very beat of the divine drum, the damaru, in the sound of the words themselves. Think about what that actually means. Sound is vibration, rhythm is frequency. And here is a hymn composed thousands of years ago, where the physical structure of the syllables was engineered to recreate the sensation of a cosmic rhythm through pure sound. Whether you experience that as devotion, as art, or as an extraordinary intuitive grasp of acoustic pattern, it is real, it survives intact today, and it is still chanted in Shiva temples across the world during Pradosh Kal and especially on Maha Shivaratri. That wasn't Ravana's only gift to sound and music. Tradition also credits him with the Ravanahatha, a bowed stringed instrument said to have been fashioned by Ravana himself in his devotion to Shiva. And this is not some forgotten relic confined to scripture. The Ravanahatha is still played today by folk musicians in Rajasthan and across parts of India, carrying his name forward through actual living sound, generation after generation, into the present moment. Now, Ravana's brilliance wasn't limited to devotion and music. He was also a scholar of the physical world in ways that still echo through Indian tradition today. He is credited as the author of the Ravana Samhita, a text on astrology, palmistry, and gemology, along with the Arka Prakasham, a treatise on medicine and healing remedies, said to have been composed as a dialogue with his queen Mandodari. Across generations, practitioners of Jyotisha, Vedic astrology, have continued to study and reference this text for its detailed treatment of planetary influence, nakshatras, and their effects on human life. The Ravana Samhita is traditionally divided into sections on mantra, tantra, and yantra, and within it are teachings on gemstones and their planetary correspondences, the same foundational thinking that still underlies Vedic gem therapy today. This is a king who ruled one of the most prosperous civilizations described in our epics, and who still found the depth of mind to author works on medicine, gemstones, and the movement of the heavens. Not many rulers in any tradition, ancient or modern, were simultaneously warriors, poets, musicians, and scholars of the sky. Ravana was all of them at once. And then, of course, there is Lanka itself, golden, described as unmatched in splendor, its towers and palaces said to rival the abodes of the Devas. At its center was the Pushpaka Vimana, the divine flying vehicle Ravana possessed, capable of traveling across the skies at will, originally created by Vishwakarma, the divine architect, and won by Ravana through his own might and merit. Descriptions of the Vimana speak of a vehicle that could expand and contract according to the needs of its passengers, that moved without visible means, and that later carried Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana back to Ayodhya at the end of the epic. Whatever you personally believe about the literal nature of the Vimana, its presence in our scriptures tells you something important. The civilization being described here was not primitive. It was a civilization whose imagination, whose spiritual technology, and whose command over knowledge reached heights that our stories still strain to fully capture even now. So why does the world remember Ravana only as the villain? Because in the end, all of that brilliance was undone by a single flaw: ego. The same immense self-belief that let him master the Vedas, compose the Tandava Stotram, and conquer the three worlds is exactly what led him to believe he could take what wasn't his and defy Dharma itself. And that is, in many ways, the deepest lesson embedded in his story. Not that knowledge and power are dangerous, but that even the most extraordinary mind in creation is not exempt from the consequences of losing humility. Ravana's story endures for a reason. He was a Brahmin by birth, a devotee whose surrender to Shiva was total, a poet whose verses still shape sound and rhythm today, a healer, an astrologer, a musician whose instrument still sings in villages across India, and a king whose empire was said to touch the sky. He remains, even in defeat, one of the most complete human beings our tradition has ever described. A reminder that greatness and downfall can live inside the very same being. And maybe that's exactly why Rama's victory over him means as much as it does. Defeating an ordinary enemy would have been unremarkable. But Dharma triumphing over someone this learned, this devoted, this powerful, A being who had mastered the Vedas, composed immortal hymns, and commanded the very sky. That is what makes the Ramayana the epic it is. Ravana wasn't a footnote standing in Rama's way. He was the proof of how high a being can rise and how far even the highest can fall the moment humility is forgotten. If this changed how you see him, even a little, that's exactly the point. Let me know in the comments which part of Ravana's story surprised you most. And if you want to go deeper into the Shiva Tandava Stotram itself, verse by verse, that's exactly what I'm covering next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.